Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird, and welcome back to Wicca 101. Class is in session once more. This week's lesson is on the shorter side, and it's about daily devotions. Now, you might be asking yourself, what on earth do I mean by daily devotions? That sounds like an awful lot of time, trouble, and work. And of course, it sounds so even more so because in our culture, religion tends to be a very passive thing. For a lot of people, if they leave their homes at all to go and worship, they go into their building, church or temple, and, they sit down very nicely and they listen to what's being told to them, and that is kind of the sum total of their effort. I'm sure there are very sincere people who do make efforts to live their lives in a manner that's in accordance with the principles of their religion, but it's not really an active, thoughtful process for them. And the idea of active participation and honestly self-direction of spirituality is oftentimes a very new thought for people who are interested in Wicca, witchcraft, or paganism, and you add on to the idea of this becoming part of your daily practices in life, I can see how that would be absolutely daunting. But the thing of it is, so many of us, we are our own priest, we are our own priestess. The person who decides where we need to focus our spirituality, well, that's up to us. If we're going to grow, well, we're going to have to push ourselves to do so. And especially if when it comes to practitioners of the craft, the only way we're going to learn skills and gain knowledge is if we sit ourselves down and say, this is what we're going to do, and then we follow through. It's been said that Wicca, in any form of witchcraft really, is a way of life, and indeed it is. But in order for it to be a way of life, it has to be a part of your life. And being part of our lives, that means day in, day out. This is simply how you go about your business. And that's really what sets witchcraft and Wicca apart from other spiritual paths, particularly those of the monotheistic field. Now, as with everything, practice makes better. No one's going to become an adept practitioner overnight. It just doesn't happen that way, and it's not going to happen without consistent efforts. I don't care how much of a prodigy someone is, and there are legitimate magical prodigies out there. It doesn't mean anything unless you're able to build up your skill level. So we should strive to gain knowledge and practical experience every year, and it's really helpful if we set our goals accordingly. And also keep in mind that a lot of the biggest leaps we take in our spiritual lives and the greatest lessons that we learn, it's very seldom the result of some big dramatic working that was real complicated and sophisticated and all this and that. It's usually just the result of walking your path day by day. And then you gradually build yourself over time, and the next thing you know, 5 years go by and you look to where you are now as opposed to where you were when you started, and then you can really begin to measure just how far of a distance you've traveled. So let's get into the meat of this and talk about ideas for daily practices. And these are just a couple of ideas. This is not the only way. It's more than anything else an attempt to get everyone to just kind of think about it. Where do they have room for spirituality in their lives? How could they add something spiritual to their daily routine to where it's not a burden, to where it's something that's refreshing? It's because the last thing you want is to build up this spiritual practice in which you're essentially just treating it like a to-do list and you're crossing off each item. I mean, that's not going to lead to spiritual enlightenment. It's certainly not going to be a joyful thing for you, and it's going to prevent you from actually fulfilling the purpose of any religious path, which is to help make you a better person. A burdened person is not generally someone who is going about and improving themselves. So that's something to keep in mind. So idea number one, making daily prayers and offerings. There's nothing that, we don't have to spend any money to pray. Oftentimes it's a graceful thing if we also light a candle or a stick of incense, but it's not something that's required to do. And if, say you decided to greet the goddess at sunset and greet the god at sunrise, just very brief prayers, just touching base, letting them know that you are wanting to build a relationship with them, that matters. The fact that if you do it consistently, they're going to pay attention to that. They're going to notice, oh, here's someone who's walking the talk, not just someone who's going to say that they want this and such because they think a title makes them more glamorous or cool or whatever else. It's a proof of sincerity when we do things on the daily basis like that. And as far as offerings go, again, this does not have to be something consistent. Something as simple as if you were to leave a food offering, say setting aside a portion of your breakfast or a little bit of your coffee and giving that as an offering to share with the gods, that is showing a token of goodwill. It's showing that you're wanting to have an exchange of energy with them, and it's showing devotion. You're not necessarily asking anything of them. You're simply saying, you are important to me, you're important in my life, and I want to start having more two-way kind of communication. So that's something to consider. Second idea is to resolve to study just, say, a chapter a day in a book about paganism, Wicca, or witchcraft. And if there's any exercises associated with that chapter, go ahead and do them if it's within your power to do so. And if it's not, well, journal about it, think about it, write down what your reactions are. Think about the ideas in the context of what happens if those ideas were applied in your day-to-day life, and you will start getting a lot more out of your studies than if you were just kind of speed reading, seeing how quickly you can finish the book. Third idea is, of course, meditation. If we have access to the internet, that means we have access usually to YouTube, and that means we have access to guided meditations. And there's all kinds of meditations we can do. We could work on our chakras once a day. We could reach out to spirit animals, or do deity path working, or do healing work, or any number of things that there is really just a meditation out there for about any kind of intention you could possibly have. And if you do that regularly, not only will it help you learn a skill of meditation, it will also help you understand the flow of energy a little bit better. And again, it is a way of reaching out to the gods and showing that this is more than just being seen on social media, that this is sincere and you mean it and you're wanting to learn something, you want to grow. Fourth idea is to actively work on your Book of Shadows and also your Book of Mirrors, if you have one. You can reflect on what you've been learning about. Think about how you would explain an idea that you just learned to someone else. And then write that explanation down. And if you don't like the explanation, then keep working on it until you feel like you can explain something very simply, very succinctly. My rule of thumb is if, say, a 13-year-old can understand one of the lessons that we have here, then it's explained well enough. But if it's someone who's of that age, who certainly has mental faculties and has been accustomed to learning how to think critically, but if I haven't presented it in such a way as it makes sense to them, then, it's time to go back to the drawing board. Think about how you can communicate things clearly, because you never know when the time might come when someone might be curious about what you're practicing, and they might have questions. If you have succinct answers that are reasonable and logical, then those conversations will be much more productive. Also, to add to any of your magical journals would be your own artwork, if you are so inclined. And for the rest of us who aren't, there are witchy coloring books. And even, yes, it is a bit childlike to sit down with the color pencils and make a picture, but it is about adding beauty. And, for those of us who cannot draw, it's the best we can do. Don't hate us. Our talents lie in other directions, and it's our only way of making our Book of Shadows more attractive. You can also look for interesting bits of lore to add to your notes if you're focusing on a particular pantheon, learning everything you can about them, the culture of the time, the languages, all of that, anything you can find that might be useful to you later on. And fifth idea, and the last I'm going to mention in this particular video, is choose a skill to master. This would be more of a year-long process. Whether you're wanting to do more kitchen magic, or you're wanting to really learn how to work with crystals, or to try out healing work, or you want to get really comfortable with divination, just choose a skill and then work at that for, say, 15 to 20 minutes per day. Then after a year's time, you'll find how far you've come. This is especially true if you're working on divination skills. If you were to study the tarot cards for 15-20 minutes a day, over the course of a year, you are going to know your deck inside and out. And that's even if you have, like me, a memory that is limited. Now, homework. First question, reflect on the difference between taking a passive versus an active approach to spirituality. How would it change your daily routine if you decided, and I stress if you decided to make Wicca a way of life? Second question, journal about whether or not daily spiritual practice is what you're truly looking for. And this is a very important question. Because because someone is watching these videos and going through the process and getting better acquainted with Wicca, that's not the same thing as knowing that you want to make a commitment to walk this particular path. It's not the same thing as deciding that, yes, witchcraft is for you. It's not even the same thing as making a decision about whether or not you want to be pagan. Just think about it, because it is going to be harder work to be pagan and certainly harder work to be a witch than it would be if you decided to pursue another religion. So being honest with yourself and asking yourself, I've learned some things. Is it sinking in? Is it something that's really calling to me or not? Because as I said at the very beginning of this class, the question is not, can I convert you to Wicca? The question is, do you have the information you need to decide whether or not this is a spiritual path you're even interested in? And that's something that only someone watching, only you can answer that for yourself. No one else knows the answer for that. Not your relatives, not your friends, not me. That's something that has to come from you. So think about what you want and what you need spiritually, and whether or not you think Wicca could provide that. And the third question is, without having to commit to anything, what do you think would be a meaningful daily spiritual practice? I think that could be very interesting, especially once we have our group discussions tomorrow, because then you'll hear about all kinds of different spiritual practices that people do on the daily and the benefits that brings to various people's lives. But that is our class for this week. I told you it was going to be short and sweet. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will join us for the workshop discussion at Blackbird's Brew tomorrow. It'll be at 3 p.m. Central Time, and there was a link in the description box below where you can join our group. We're on Discord, by the way. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, leave me a comment. But that's it for now. I'll see you in another video. Bye.